They were on a challenging winter hiking expedition, traversing hundreds of kilometers of icy wilderness in the far Ural Mountains of western Siberia. They are seen in the shot, digging a platform in the heavy snow to set up camp along the slope of Kolotsiakal, which means dead mountain in the Mansi language. The hikers left their tent and belongings in the dark after an hour or so. The tent was located by a search party weeks later, half destroyed and snowed in. The inside had been sliced open. We discovered frozen remains about 1,500 meters distant, with the majority of the victims appearing unclothed and without shoes. This suggests that the party was roused from their tent so quickly that they didn't have time to undo the zipper or don the bulky winter clothing that would have kept them alive in the harsh weather. Finding the remaining members of the group would require an additional 2 months. Their autopsies revealed horrific, unexplained injuries, and they were all dead. Since then, dozens more hypotheses have emerged, ranging from extraterrestrial contact to official conspiracy theories. All the theories boil down to one essential point, though. Why did they ever leave their tent? Things start to fall into place when one delves further into the Dyatlov Pass event, named for the group's leader, 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov. So, let's keep it simple for the purpose of this film and to describe what might have happened that night. Pieced together from preliminary investigational hand-drawn maps and case file descriptions, this is a preliminary graphic depicting the location of the 9 hikers' bodies in respect to the deserted tent. We discovered 3 distinct groups of corpses. These 6 succumbed to cold temperatures, the remainder due to severe internal damage. With these 2 images, we can better understand what transpired after the party exited the tent. Footprints were located that led away from the tent and vanished into the snow after around 500 meters, according to the search group. The first 2 corpses were found under a cedar tree 1,500 meters downslope from the tent as they continued in their direction. They had constructed a little fire and were practically naked. Fatal hypothermia ensued. Continuing in a straight line from the tree, 3 other bodies were discovered thereafter. It appeared as though they were attempting to return to the tent, a feat that would have been next to impossible in minus 30-degree weather and without adequate clothing. Like them, they died of frostbite. We did not discover the remaining 4 until approximately 2 months later, encased in 4 meters of snow within a ravine. The investigation becomes quite perplexing at this point. 3 of them, in contrast to the others, had gone through profound psychological trauma. The autopsy reports concluded that both Dubinina and Zolotaryov died due to internal injuries. Thibaut Brignol suffered a significant skull fracture, while Zolotaryov suffered multiple broken ribs. A forensics specialist who was involved in the inquiry likened their wounds to the trauma that results from the shockwave of a bomb. More was to come, though. Dubinina's tongue was missing as if it had been removed, and Zolotaryov had lost his eyes. Kolovatov and she were both donning garments tainted with high levels of radioactive materials. Soviet investigator Lev Ivanov ended the case on May 28, 1959, despite numerous unresolved concerns. He concluded that no wrongdoing had taken place because the hikers showed no signs of physical harm, and all of their belongings were unharmed. According to the report, the hikers were unable to overcome an overwhelming force that caused their demise. Countless hypotheses have been advanced in an effort to decipher the events of that fateful night in 1959. Including but not limited to UFOs, Soviet military tests gone awry, a Yeti attack and KGB murder. Significant evidence is lacking for the majority of these theories. But not everything about the case is a mystery, even the more unsettling parts. For example, there is the missing soft tissue, which includes the eyes of Zolotaryov and Dubinina, as well as Dubinina's tongue. In this case, investigators discovered Dubinina's body face down in a creek. At the time, the coroner determined that these were post-mortem changes caused by natural decay after being exposed to running water for months. However, 2 theories in particular, one containing an overwhelming force and the other not, provide reasonable answers to the case's 2 most crucial questions. What led the hikers to abandon the tent the way they did, and what may have caused the enormous internal injuries that some of them sustained? One of these theories has been considered and debunked for years: avalanche. Because this area isn't considered prone to avalanches, and the internal injuries don't match those commonly discovered in avalanche victims who mostly die from asphyxiation after being swept away by snow. This explanation has often been dismissed, but a scientific article published in January 2021 reveals that the hikers could have been hit by a very unique form of avalanche. I'm a professor at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. My name is Johann Gaumo. Avalanches in the snow are my specialty. Geotechnical engineer Alexander Puzerin and colleague Johann Gaume created a model to mimic a delayed slab avalanche, an extremely unusual kind of avalanche that would have affected the tent. The whole slab shifts in a fraction of a second. It careens down the hill, shattering large chunks. When traveling at its true speed, the wind slab's moniker as the Big Killer becomes crystal clear. A slab avalanche happens when there is a thick layer of snow on top of a thinner, less dense layer. And when that fragile layer gives way, the collapse will travel down the hill, triggering a slab avalanche. If a slab avalanche had occurred in the Dyatlov case, it would have been caused by cutting the slope to set up the tent. But hours later, whatever it was that sent them tumbling down the mountain happened. We think the heavy winds dumped some more snow on top of the tent. As a result, the piling continued, and the weak layer eventually gave way, triggering the avalanche that destroyed the tent and killed the hikers within. The injuries sustained by some of the hikers could be explained by this type of hit, which we demonstrated. Fearing a second avalanche and stuck under the slab, they hacked their way out of the tent and fled to safety in the trees. This hypothesis explains the group's horrific injuries by positing that a delayed slab avalanche was feasible under these conditions, as demonstrated by data-driven models and simulations. It's not tough to perish atop Kolat Shakal on the Dead Mountain. Richard Holmgren is a Swedish archaeologist who led an expedition that retraced the steps of the Dyatlov group in 2019. His group proposes a different explanation for how these injuries occurred. The idea was to go there exactly at the same moment, and we wanted to erect the tent there exactly the same night. We thought that this could enable us to grasp their plight, and after experiencing the extreme weather of the region, his group came to one basic conclusion. From my perspective, the katabatic scenario is the only idea that would explain all the processes. The powerful falling wind, known as a katabatic wind, can swiftly increase speed as it descends a steep slope, mimicking the conditions of a hurricane in an instant. In a katabatic environment, it goes extremely fast, from strong gusts to uncontrollable strong winds. It can change radically in seconds. The process is quick. A rapid evacuation would be necessary if this situation befell the Dyatlov hikers, because the canvas tent was vulnerable to tearing apart. Since it's only going to take a few seconds, the obvious thing to do is to get out of here as soon as possible. Equipment would have been frozen solid due to the temperatures, which hovered at -30 degrees Celsius. It takes me 3 or 4 minutes to put on a single boot under these conditions, as you well know. One shoe. Under the katabatic wind scenario, the Dyatlov group stays in the tent, unscathed. The same reasoning is used to explain these cases of hypothermia as well. The bodies were discovered in the ravine, which is where the injuries occurred. Keep in mind that about 4 meters of snow covered these remains. They may have sought refuge in a snow fortress that eventually collapsed, engulfing them. When the heavy snow fell on top of them, it compressed their chests. In the spring, when the snow thawed, the weight increased. Post-mortem injuries are also a possibility. It took months for the remains to decompose under the weight of the snow before they were discovered. In February 1959, 9 seasoned hikers excavated a platform into a slope to set up camp on a frigid night. Something happened out of nowhere, hours later, that sent them plunging into intolerably cold weather without any clothing. A katabatic wind and a slab avalanche are only 2 of the numerous hypotheses. They share a lot of ground with each other. To account for the snowfall from higher elevations, the slab avalanche theory necessitates katabatic wind. According to the katabatic theory, the collapse of the snow den is caused by a large slab pressing down on a spongy layer of snow, which was their shelter. Both provide a reasonable explanation for the unexplained injuries and strong arguments for why the Dyatlov group left their tent. Attempts to explain the hikers' actions ultimately lead to more questions than answers, due to the lack of survivors. This is one of the most perplexing portions of the Dyatlov Pass tragedy. The response of the hikers after the incident, after what happened during this night, is perhaps the thing that will never be explained.